Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. It's Sunday, which means it's stream time on Elfbait, and I am joined by a guest today. I have Oscar, aka Saxius, aka the world's most evil DM, and unfortunately, I've had to bow out of this game for other commitments. But he was a very excellent DM, but boy, was he evil. Looks like we got Chris / Logan / From the Hilt here.
Hello.
And let's see. Not a lot of folks here yet. I'm sure they'll turn up. What are we talking about today? We are talking about games I want to run. Or, now that I have a guest, games we want to run. And the why and the how. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Carrick. Serlik. Sararak, whichever it is.
Carlick.
Probably Carlick, I know. There's, if you're like me, and you probably are, because gamers are just weird, shiny gremlin, magpie, pack rats. You have lots of games that you've collected that you want to run. You may even have games you've collected that you really have no interest in running, but we're not here to talk about those. I mean, I have lots and lots of games that I have either I've accumulated because somebody's like, I have found this, do you want it? I'm like, I have no interest specifically in it, but sure. I've come into possession of so many games that way. But the ones I want to talk about are the ones that I actually very much want to run. And the reasons I feel like it might be difficult or has been difficult to find players for them. A lot of these are older games too, that I've had in my possession for a while. And a lot of them are games I have run in the past. I just really want to run again. Hey, Cody, welcome. So, before I dive into it, because I got a stack over here, I don't usually do this shelfie thing, but I do have a stack that I accumulated to go over some of the things. What's on your list of things that you really want
to run? So for me, I have been eyeing up Feral Gaming's Incorporated. They have something called for Ghost Ops, which is just modern day military stuff, but mixed in with like what's it called, like the D&D system. So I very much like the idea of running a sort of like Bright kind of game, the one we had with Will Smith, sort of Shadowrun style, where you're playing as individual fantasy races or fantasy groups, but in the modern day, and how we've had to like incorporate the fantasy world with the modern day era, that sort of things. I also have a number of space games. Corellius is another one that I have.
Coriolis or whatever it is, yeah.
That one, would love it. I love the Arabian theme. I love the fact that it's such a different take on what is effectively, spacefaring. I really like that. I've just never been able to get a group to buy into the pitch. And let's see what else. Yeah, like I've got other variations, OSR and the likes, where it's a case of finding a group where they turn around and go like, oh, I would love to play this. I mean, I've got Iron and Dragon.
Yeah, I intentionally avoided any of the D&D alikes. I've got fantasy adventure games coming out my ears. Because I'm currently playing in technically 3 D&D games. I'm running 2 and playing in another.
Yeah.
So I've got that covered. And I'm playing 3 different editions. I'm playing in Cody's 2nd edition. I'm running a 5e, and I'm running an OSR game. So
yeah. But if we stay clear of the D&D ones, then I've got a number of other ones. I also have Broken Earth, which is Savage World. Although I would like to use the Pathfinder system for that, purely because it's post-apocalyptic, and there is a lot of like base building ideas behind it, but very simplified, so you don't have to micromanage all of the specific resources. It's very, very easy to oversee.
It's one thing I really like that they plugged into the new Twilight 2000. I saw that Logan had posted Twilight 2000. The new Twilight 2000, which I really want to pick up, has built into it a base building setup, which is great because one of the things you always did in the game is try to create some sort of an enclave. Either you found a town where you just hold up by yourselves, or you took kind of took a village under your wing, or whatever you were doing. But there was never really much of a system for it, so you just role played it, and that's a perfectly legit way to do it. But I think a lot of people nowadays really want that. Well, it's not even a new idea, because I mean it goes back to stronghold building for D&D. People like that. There's a lot of people who do like it, and in a game where it's part of the genre, I feel like having a system and having the players really be able to see what the nuts and bolts of it are. So that's a good one too. Which game is that you said that has the base building in it? Broken Earth?
Broken Earth. Yeah, I'll quickly get the book.
I feel in a post-apocalyptic setting of any sort, that's a really good thing to have. And you said that's Savage Worlds?
It's Savage World, yes. That's what it's based on. And it's very simple. It basically goes like, here's resources, where they call it like scavengry, and here is, you need to build generators using that, so that you've got X amount of electricity, so that you can expand on it, so you can have workshops and all of these things. So it's really simplified down to like, here's how much you have to build to order to get this resource, to have operating like very functional and contributing parts to your establishment, or to your outpost. So that way, exactly like, okay, we've got a workshop, we can now have these benefits from it, and we've got access to this kind of weaponry, but we need to go out and get more, scraps, so that we can do X, Y, and Z. So you're always looking to get one resource to build up another one, so you can expand on the current one. Really simple, but it goes such a long way because you have a consistent goal in mind.
Oh yeah, I that speaks to me a lot. I've been playing Project Zomboid on my computer for a while. I just picked it up, and man, is that game granular. And because of that, there's always something that you're striving for in that game, and it really speaks to me on a survival level. Like, it also, so for me, I'm one of those people who likes encumbrance, who likes counting arrows. We've talked about this before, and so having to go out and worry about like my food intake, and okay, so I've played long enough in the setting to where the power grid has gone down, so now I don't have any water flowing, I don't have any electricity. So I had to go out and find, scavenge propane tanks and grills and stuff from other houses, and I'm having to like make fires, and, find a generator so occasionally I can run my microwave and stuff like that. I accidentally burned down my kitchen in the game because I left my stove on. It's that granular game. I just recently had a character die of food poisoning, not of zombie death, but food poisoning. Because I took a risk and ate a rotten hamburger out of a restaurant. But that kind of stuff I think is really cool. And when you talk about like an easy system to bring up like base building and to like put it all together, sort of, like I said, for me, it harkens back to the old stronghold castle construction system from AD&D, where it wasn't super detailed, but it was enough to where, okay, I know that I can buy a 20 by 20 building, a stone building for X number of gold. It takes this amount of time to build. Now I know that if I want my larger houses to be, I just have to worry about square footage, basically, right? And you can do all of that. So I think having that simple system works really well. Real quick, want to say welcome to, it looks like Squirrel Hermit, Full Metal Dragon, and Grumpy Old Slan slipped in here. Cool. All right, so what's on my list here? I think, first of all, I'll start with an oldie but a goodie. And you've heard me talk about this one. This is Justifiers. This is an old digest size game book. These are a few of the books. This is not the whole library. But I had to reaccumulate them because this is one of the games that I lost in my move way back when. So Justifiers is high on my list, and I think it lends really well to one-offs, one-shots, or short shots, because it's all about slingshotting your party across the cosmos to investigate, to do the first investigation of a planet and justify it for the corporation. And so you can play longer run campaigns in it if you wanted to, but most of the action in the universe is you are playing these corporate. Basically, you're owned by the corporation because you're all either genetically engineered humanoid animals, or you're humans who are under contract, or altered humans who have had their sentences bought off by the corporation and stuff like that. So you have a buyback as one of your game stats, and it's expressed in millions of dollars. And so you go through and you have to do these missions to try and buy your character's buyback down. But it's really cool because you have a huge variety of character types, different animals and stuff like that. But also, you're never stuck on one planet for too long. I mean, you're stuck there long enough because your return gate won't activate until I think it's like 2 weeks or something like that after you set down on the planet, and your shuttle only has enough fuel to go from orbit to land. And then once you're on the planet, you only have the few vehicles that can fit in the cargo hold of your shuttle unassembled. You have to actually take them out and put them together. They're all stored away in crates. So you have to land on a planet, create a base camp, and then survey the planet, deal with whatever's there, and then set up your return gate, have it activated, and then go back and make your report, get your pay. You get bonuses in the game for finding alien artifacts or interesting life forms that the corporations can use. You actually get penalized for willful destruction of corporate material. So, like, if you're like, we'll just beat that big giant monster by crashing the helicopter into it, well, get ready to pay for the helicopter out of your buyback. So, So it's a fun game. It's a little mechanically clunky. It's a percentile-based system, and unfortunately, it's an independently produced game that did not seem to have an editor. And so one of the big problems, for example, is there are holes in the rules that you can figure out by reading the entirety of it, but you aren't going to figure it out just on a quick playthrough. That's one on my list. Another one that's there is I was a huge fan of the comic, and still am, but ElfQuest. Great, way ahead of its time comic book from way back. Still being produced, still being written, new stories coming out. The Chaosium system was shoehorned into this. In fact, this came out, so Chaosium got the license to do it, and rather than create a new system for it, Chaosium forced the writers to shoehorn in their new basic role-playing system into it. So they made it work, but it's probably not the best system for ElfQuest. If you're familiar with the comics, ElfQuest is a very much role-play heavy universe. Combat does happen, but it's a lot of intelligence and emotional intelligence and interaction with NPCs. There's a lot more of that than there is straight up fighting. But they made it work pretty well. And the game allows you to play everything from elves to trolls to humans to the preservers, which are these fairy kind of creatures. It's an interesting world because it's sort of a prehistoric world that the elves exist in. There are several supplements and source books that have them all, but this is just the rule book. Very nicely self-contained, and it's illustrated throughout with comic art from the comics itself. So definitely worth checking out. So those are my first two on my list. You mentioned a couple there that you wanted to do. Any others on your list?
On mine, I think a lot of it is actually just down to like themes that I also want to focus on. I mean, take the one where you played in. That's very much themed around exploration.
Yeah.
And that's very much based around, the players going out and exploring things and looking at what you played in, for example. We saw a lot of, you got to go out there to then go back. We were tracking food supplies. We were tracking, rest and whether you were safe or not. And a lot of focus around the survival things, which is again, but that's more like where it's not so much the system itself. It's more around like I want to take a specific aspect of a game or of the different themes that we have in role playing games, and then say right, this is what we want. We're focusing on, and then get the buy-in from the players from that. Because I find that you can have like very, again, using the game that you were in, it's gone very deep into like the investment side from the players with, you're out in a new world, you have a fort, you need to supply for the fort needs to be able to get merchandise back to the mainland, and you also have to fight off all the monsters of the locals of the local area to make sure that you sustain yourself. So I often find that it's very specific themes that I want to then also go out and explore, like exploration in if you play like Stars Without Number, or I had a Shadowrun game where I focused on community, where the players came from a community, and I told them you can't just pack your bags and leave. You're stuck here. This is where you live. This is your entire lives are around here. If you up and leave, you can, but that's it. Like your community relies on you, and you rely on them. So don't just ditch them.
Yeah, that's one of the kind of going back to a couple of the themes you were talking about. One of the things that really appeals to me about like Justifiers, for example, is it is very much a resource management game. Everything you have is either your character's personal equipment or the limited equipment that fits in that shuttle.
Yeah.
And that shuttle is a finite amount of space because the gates that they're using in the universe to go across the universe only stay open long enough to allow something of a certain length to go through, and they can only be a certain diameter in area. So your shuttle is literally this long, almost tubular shuttle that squeezes through these gates for the absolute maximum time the gate will stay open. And in that, you've got 2 decks where you've got a cargo bay with all your equipment geared up. They don't even have quarters on the shuttle. The shuttle is intended, the whole idea is once you get to the planet, you have to set up a base camp. It comes with shelters and everything. I did do an alternate deck plan of the shuttle that includes a quarters for the commanding officer. So it basically, the shuttle becomes a command center and he at least gets a place to stay. Their deck plan was a little weird originally, so I did 2 versions. In Dungeon Fog, I did a high graphic version of the original version, and then I did a version of it for my own. So that's a really heavy resource management. Like you have to, they give you materials to go with it. I mean, the game lists every last item that is on the shuttle as a standard loadout.
Yeah.
There are a few variations based on mission profile. Like if you're going to a water planet, they're not going to have ground cars. You're going to have skimmers or subs or whatever, and the game has those in it. And there's also like an aqua shuttle version, I think, that actually can submerge that they would send to these water planets and stuff. But that's super cool. And the other thing, talking about like games about community and like tight groups, it's one of the things about ElfQuest. So in ElfQuest, most of your PCs, if you're going around how the comic itself bases itself, it's all about little pockets of people, the various groups of elves that have evolved over the eons of being trapped on this planet, and have developed in different ways, or pockets of humanity as they're evolving and developing, pockets of trolls who are doing their own little things. You could have mixed groups. Nothing says you can't. The comics have kind of borne that out over the years where, trolls have befriended elves, even though there's kind of an enmity. It's funny, it plays as fantasy, and this is the whole kicker in the comic. Spoilers for a comic that's like 30, 40 years old. Uh, you read this whole comic, and you're thinking it's fantasy, and then you find out in the end it's science fiction. So the elves were originally space traveling shapeshifters who had who had magic abilities, right? Who wanted to go to medieval Earth, or not Earth, the world of Two Moons, which is an Earth analog. They wanted to go to the medieval period, and so as they were doing so, there was a revolution, a revolt on their ship, and so their ship was this giant egg spherical ship that they had transformed to look like an elf castle, like a fairy castle, and they had taken on the form of elves and their servitor races, their two servitor races, which are these like digging, industrious ape type creatures, and then these like butterfly creatures. They had flesh shaped to look like trolls and fairies because they were going to land in medieval times where humans venerated elves and fairies and trolls. Well, the trolls revolt and cause an accident in the ship, which has it land in the wrong time, and they land on this planet when humans are not medieval, but ape men, and they react badly to seeing demons come out of this castle from the sky.
Yeah,
immediately start bashing. So the elves scatter, and the trolls scatter, and the fairies scatter, and they form these pockets. So over time, they've had all these little enclaves show up, and the game really like the comics, focuses on that sense of community. Whether then that's often questing to find your place in the world or just surviving. The comic itself has evolved. The humans have changed over the course of the comics because the elves are so long lived. They've actually written that into the comic. Like it started with the humans being in sort of the Neolithic period at the time that the actual story kicks off. Not the backstory, but the actual story. And currently, in the main comic, they are now a Steel Age because they're running into basically Viking analogs and stuff like that. So, but the elves have gone to these long sleeps over time because some of the elves don't have the same immortal lifespan that some of the older ones did. Really complex comic. Really complex world, and the comic was so ahead of its time in terms of its emotional awareness, its emotional intelligence, the depth of its characters. Both men and women in the comic are super strong and super capable. Not super strong as in like mighty.
I know what you mean.
Well written. They're capable characters. They're deep characters. So it's a really heavy role play setting. Super game. If you can get into, we used to play a lot of it when I was a kid. Of course, we're super into the universe. All right. Next up on my list, though. Let's see. Actually, I want to go to some of the start comics.
Yeah.
Let's see. Metamorphosis Alpha. It would be cool. Yes. And I know somebody mentioned that RPG Grandma does a lot of stuff on that. She does. And that's actually kind of how it came back on my radar. I've known about it forever, but it was sort of always this obscure thing. And its connection to Gamma World was not very... I didn't really understand its connection to Gamma World. Now I know it's basically Proto Gamma World and canonically in the same universe as Gamma World. Jim, I think the reason that we never played Heroes Unlimited back in the day, even though we may have made a few characters, is that we had Marvel. We're always playing the Marvel RPG. And so it was just a much more quick and easy and ultimately satisfying version of a superhero game. So going through Palladium's system to do it was not something we ever did. I know we used some of the powers in Heroes Unlimited and stuff for other things. Yeah, I'm not even getting into the miniatures games that I want to play.
No, let's not. That's going to go on forever.
Yeah, that's a lot. We'll do another video on that. Let's see. All right. So next on my list, speaking of Metamorphosis Alpha, would be Gamma World. And this is the reprint, the print on demand of first edition, which is actually a nice book. I really, really wish they would get off their ass and clean up their PDF and do and offer a print on demand of the 2E, which is a true 2E, which is this game cleaned up and formatted to like the BX BECMI standards. Because this game originally came out in a box set, but it is so wall of text and so cumbersome. The 2E is better, but by far still a little opaque at times. It's like you have to dig like what. Yeah, I had to go through 4 editions of this game to find out the cost of ammunition for slug throwing weapons.
Oh,
It also doesn't help. It also doesn't help that in the course of the different editions, and even in the primary one, the the concept of slug throwers changed even in first edition. So when they first present slug throwers in this book, for example, slug throwers are a weird form of projectile weapon that does not use a conventional bullet. It uses a hydrogen cell that projects a dumb projectile.
Right.
So you have ammo stored in your gun, and you also have a hydrogen cell in your gun. Then the hydrogen cell creates the explosion. Then later on in Famine at Fargo, they introduced conventional weapons, which then causes its own problems canonically because this game is supposed to take place in like the 24th century, or after the 24th century.
Yeah.
The society that fell was in the 24th century, and yet all the art has like 1950s blade fans, and people are carrying around bolt action rifles and stuff like that. Now, chances are those weapons would still be around, but how common are they going to be when you're basically starting from the Star Trek style universe that falls?
Yeah, it's the equivalent of like flintlocks in modern day. It's like we don't really have that many of them around.
Well, and flintlocks show up in the game because honestly, they're one of those weapons that's easier to make in the apocalypse than say like an M16. Going on to next game is going to be this is actually Star Frontiers magazine, but yeah, Star Frontiers, the RPG. So I have it. I've had it for a while. I have both it and the spaceship version, and I want to run that game so bad because it does all the things Traveller does, but I feel like it's a little bit more light. So Traveller, of course, gets down and dirty with the grittiness and the sort of space truckeriness for the most part. Star Frontiers has more playable alien races in it stuff. The other thing that makes it great to play nowadays is publications like this. This is a print on demand of the first 6 issues of Star Frontiersman. There are all told, I think, a total of something like 50 or 60 issues between 2 fan-made publications of Star Frontiersman and the Frontier Explorer, and it is lots and lots of new concepts, weapons, equipment, planets, adventures. You can get and it's still being produced, and I have even written for the publications myself. It keeps going on and on. So you're not just yes, the game may be officially dead, but it is alive and well through the fan community.
Which is honestly, it's incredible that the fan community is keeping it going. It just means how strong it is.
Yeah, and when I say fanzines, I'm not talking about like 12 pages, 20 pages. There was one issue that was like 86 pages of content. I mean, and that's pretty impressive for a fan magazine. Right now, it's going about quarterly with the second edition of Frontier Explorer, or is it Star Frontiersman? I can't remember. There's a bit of a rift between the 2 magazines, and so I can't remember which one it is. From the hilt, I'm not sure what you mean by this because I'm not talking about if this is in reference to the 2E PDF cleanup. I'm not talking about re-releasing Gamma World. I'm talking about putting out a print-on-demand offer of the second edition PDF on DriveThru like they have for first, third, fourth edition Gamma World. You can get all of them except for second edition. You can find printed versions of the 2E PDF on eBay for like $60, which is not bad if you consider it prints out the entire box set of multiple books into one softbound book. Iron Kingdoms is a cool setting if you want like a gritty, weird techno fantasy D&D kind of world. I have some of the old 3rd edition ones, and I used to play War Mahorts miniature wise. Let's see. Another one. This game.
No.
Star Wars. DC.
Yes. Yes.
The best Star Wars.
Yes.
That one, what can you say? It's Star Wars.
You can't go wrong with it. I'm sorry, like you just can't. Like anywhere from just doing like the frontier, you're out at like where civilization kind of ends, but still sort of exists, all the way into like the Inner Republic or even the Empire era. There is so much you can do in Star Wars. It's amazing.
Play Rebels. I mean, there are actually a few. So, like, haven't really talked much about the types of games I would like to run. Things like for Gamma World, I would like to run sort of like an open table game. I think Gamma World lends itself well to one of those kind of old school open table games where you play with whoever can make it that time, and you play whenever people can make it. And you just kind of go out into the world around your little enclave, and you find things, right?
Yeah.
Going back to Metamorphosis Alpha, I have both the first and I think 4th editions or something like that of Metamorphosis Alpha and PDF. And if I was going to run the Metamorphosis Alpha setting, I would run it using the Gamma World rules. I think the Gamma World rules are really just Metamorphosis Alpha thought out more and put through a bit of a creative refinement, so why not? But for Star Wars, like, I have framed out, I want to run a Rebel campaign. Like, every campaign I've ever run in Star Wars has always ended up being sort of a Firefly with the occasional lightsaber and Wookiee. It's like, it's all a bunch of ne'er-do-wells and some broken Jedi who ends up being more powerful than Luke Skywalker. And those are fun. That's one way you can play Star Wars. But I really think playing an actual, like, committed to the cause rebel group would be fun.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Well, I did one that was based as everyone was bounty hunters. Like out the gate, I said no force users. Out the gate, that's what everyone has to buy into. But I opened up the books for what they could play as on the principle that everyone was a part of the guild. Everyone was a bounty hunter. It was the build up to the Clone Wars, and with the Clone Wars coming through, they then got a plethora of jobs that would be, basically streaming through, both separatists, Republicans, independents, Huts, the whole 9 yards. Like it would all be coming through to them, and they then had to, basically keep up with, what they were doing, what they had to pick from. But then I kept a reputation system in the background, so that every time that they did a job for someone, they became known to that faction, and they then had to sort of sit down and go like, okay, who are we going to be amoral? Are we going to go for someone? And funnily enough, for this group, they ended up going for the Republicans. Just went, we are fully on committed, and they became like this auxiliary mercenary group that the Republicans would then sort of tag on to like really difficult jobs where they needed a distraction to be done for something else to be done over here, or nothing that would hinge their entire operations on them, but it would serve very well for the Republic's overarching job. And it was great. Like the players loved it, and there was a lot of all the money that came into them. They had to think like, do we keep it for ourselves, or do we invest in our equipment, in our spaceship? What do we do with this? Do we buy contacts and so on? Like it became this the world sort of like built up just purely because the players began thinking outside of get money, get loot. It became all about the course, as you said, and it was a great deal of fun. And yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, it's I would say with Star Wars too. Star Wars is a really good one for occasional player one shots. A friend of mine the one campaign he always talked about was he ran a campaign where the players were playing the Bothan spies who died getting the plans for the Death Star, the second Death Star.
Ooh.
Remember, Mon Mothma's quote, many Bothans died to get us this information. And
Yes.
so his campaign, his little one-shot campaign, was the players were playing those Bothan spies. I have an Ewok campaign I want to run that on Endor. I want to run a pre-contact Endor where it's before the Empire showed up, and that sounds fun to me. I mean, it would take a certain number of you. This is the other thing too. I think with games that you want to play, a lot of times it comes down to it's not so much that you can't find players; you just can't find players that are right for that game.
Yes.
And we'll get into that in a couple other games too. Here, not everybody's going to want to play Ewoks because there's a lot of people who have this weird hatred of Ewoks, even though they're horrible, evil little bastards. If you think about it,
Yeah.
They're killer death bears. But that's that's true of any game. Even in D&D, you're like, I want to run this super hyper gritty game. Your number of players is probably going to go down from where if you were to run just a wide open game.
Yeah.
But Star Wars lends itself well to flexing in different things. I ran a game, you're talking about a game where you had no Jedi. I ran a game where it was all Jedi. And it was set 400 years before the events of Star Wars. So it wasn't in the Old Republic. It wasn't tied to any of the current storylines. I picked a point in space and time where I could just tell a story that was separate from whatever. And all the PCs were all force-sensitive children of this noble family that ruled a planet who had been scattered and hidden, Luke and Leia style, based on their force talents. And and we'd use pregens because it was, it was sort of a very heavily themed game. And so I talked to the player. We kind of agreed to do pregens. However, I did know my players, so I made characters specifically for those players to kind of key into their play styles. So we had, for example, one character had an affinity for machines, and so he was sent off to a trade guild, and we had one character who had been raised on a farm world and had an affinity with animals and kind of force communication with animals. We had another character that was very diplomatic and noble who had gone off to live amongst this senatorial family. We had another, and then there was the fourth kid. I think there's one character started out with a dark side point because the plan went wrong with that character. In other words, they were all sent to hide and be in their little weird little niche communities where they could hide away and not be found by the evil that was looking for them. Basically, their older brother was looking for them because he was he overthrew the family because he got tainted by evil dark side force witches. So yeah, and so this one character had a dark side point because in his background, yes, he was sent away to be with this family to take care of him, but then they got raided by slavers and he got enslaved. So he grew up with the hatred and the spite and stuff like that. So it was fun, and I made that character and he gave that. He was made with one player in mind. That game went really well, and everybody was a force user. It was also the game where it suffered from a little bit of small universe syndrome. Like they encountered Yoda. And that encounter almost killed me because I did the entire encounter in Yoda's voice, and that ripped my throat apart. They also ran into Lando Calrissian's ancestor, and because actually now I remember it's only a couple hundred years ahead of the New Hope, because I remember they ran into young Chewbacca, like Chewbacca as a little kid. Because he's 200 plus years old. They ran into Chewbacca as a little kid. But no, it was a fun campaign. But Star Wars lends itself really well to that. I've heard people play Imperial campaigns, and I'm not quite sure I'm down for that because the Imperials made all the cool stuff, but they're the bad guys.
They really are, and it's one of those things of I have seen campaigns of where you are playing as the Imperial, but it's then the whole case of like, is the group going to be comfortable? Because you can open up a very dark can of worms with that. So it's about like, what are you wanting to go through? Like, are you playing Imperials who learn like, actually, we are the baddies. Maybe we should switch over to the rebels.
That's the ones I usually hear that are successful. Is that it's agreed upon you're all going to make Imperial characters.
Yep.
And then and you kind of explain up ahead. The campaign arc is going to be that you guys are going to get tired of it. You're just going to realize that the Empire is wrong, and it's ultimately you're going to become rebels or something to that effect. So next on my list, Necton.
All right.
This is a mecha RPG game. It's got 2 books. This is the role playing rules and the mecha light rules. There's an entire second book this size that is dedicated to just the construction system for mecha. If you wanted to custom make your mecha or create mecha for a particular universe, and it allows you to do everything from transforming motorcycles to combat androids, all the way up to spaceship-sized mecha. If you wanted to, the game will handle all of it. This is one of those games that falls into the category of if you can find the people to play it.
Yes.
Mecha universes are only interesting and only really come into their own and only feel right, especially an anime mecha universe like this is, right? I mean, it can be any mecha universe because you could technically build BattleTech with this if you wanted to, but to truly play a setting like that and do it justice requires a certain level of commitment to role-playing characters. Because anime, even mecha anime, really relies as much, if not more, upon the story of the characters, at least the good one, as it does the giant stompy robots. You might have whole episodes where giant stompy robots only show up for a few minutes in the episode because everybody else is like, having love triangles and conflict of interest and spying and all this other stuff that goes on. You have to have players that are willing to commit to the bit to have it feel right. I feel like this is also true with, like, if you're going to do a rebel campaign in Star Wars, if you don't have players who are willing to commit to the bit, it ends up being just another science fiction game set in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem I have with a lot of science fiction games is they almost always end up playing the same, whether it's Traveller or Star Frontiers or Star Wars. They almost always, whenever you have a setting where the players can be of very different career paths and are not governed by any particular command structure, they almost always end up playing the same. It's always it's basically ends up being Firefly. They all end up being Firefly.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some moral compass there, but usually it's out doing jobs and dealing with whatever they come around. Let's see. Heroes and Rogues. Yeah. If you can find the D6 Star Wars re-up, this was a fan product that they did where they looked at what West End Games, or the original writer for West End Games who did this, had been doing since they lost the property with D6 Space, D6 Modern, D6 Fantasy. And they integrated a lot of those rules into the Star Wars rules, and they put it all together in a really nicely formatted, professionally laid out PDF. And there are a bunch of people who have done like cover treatments, and you can go and have it go ahead and have it printed on demand. It ends up being like a $50 to $100 book, depending on how you're doing it, because it's pretty thick, but it incorporates a lot of stuff on fleshing out your characters. Because one of the things that they had done that D6 had done in its system after Star Wars is started putting in elements like perks and flaws for characters that you could buy to enhance your character a little bit more, to flesh out those characters. Instead of, your characters had almost always been defined specifically in Star Wars by skills and ability scores, with the occasional racial element from, you might get some special ability from whatever species you were, once the Aliens books came out. But the later versions where they integrate the perks and flaws, a lot of those alien special abilities just became perks under that system. But also you could have, your character might have, a gimped out leg. Your character might have a price on his head. And there was a way to gamify that. Because some of the archetypes were kind of weird, and they were pretty well balanced. Like if you had the smuggler character, you started out with a ship, but you also started out with like $100,000 bounty, $100,000 credit bounty on your head or something like that. And so I mean, it balanced itself out. So it's a good one. But yeah, if you can find the Star Wars D6 re-up, I highly recommend it. If you go to the Star Wars D6 Facebook community, I think it's in their files section. Or you might be able to even find it on D6 Holocron, which is a D6 online resource that has every book ever produced by West Bend in PDF, as well as a bunch of fan-made supplements. Like everything that's been coming out for Star Wars since then, they've just done netbooks for. Star Wars Rebels, the netbook. Star Wars The Clone Wars, the netbook. Star Wars Rogue One, the netbook. They just keep doing it. And they also do these really cool compilations. There's an entire compilation book on just every TIE Fighter variant that's ever been invented throughout the entire Star Wars lore.
Why not?
The fan community is alive and well for Star Wars D6 as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's still the best Star Wars in my mind because it allows you to play low-level baseline characters and not feel like you have to make some character who is already in it. You can play a Luke, as I said. You can always play a Tatooine Luke, not a Empire Strikes Back Luke where he's already out there flying and he's the hero of the rebellion. Let's see. Here's the deal. So, yes, I think that's the big thing. Giant stompy robots. If you have a group that just wants to do the fighty stuff, it'll work. But then you might as well just be playing a miniatures game, a miniature combat game. You have to actually incorporate the role playing elements for it to feel like anime. The other thing too is I think if you're trying to get that authentic Japanese animation feel to your games, again, you have to commit to the bit. You have to go in there with the mindset of, I am going to be this kind of character from anime, and they're very archetypical usually. And there are certain concessions that are going to happen. I love how Mechton in the rules has the heroic death table. Like when your character dies, you roll on this table, and it's like, you have enough time to scream out one quick exclamation before you die. And one, like the highest level of it is like, cherry blossoms glide through your mind as you remember a lost love, blah blah blah. It's really leaning into it. Like, what is it? You have time for a profound speech before your mecha explodes. Before your mecha explodes, and I like that's cool. They're committing to the bit. So, and the fact that they have a construction system is really cool. I would not suggest letting players just create their own mecha, unless that's the focus of your game. But it does allow a GM to go into that game and make whatever mecha universe you want to make. You could play Transformers with it because the game system allows you to build. I mean, what is a Transformer other than just any other mecha? But the pilot is also the brain of the machine, and they have AI rules for mecha in there. So you can do that. Let's see. What do we got going on here? Any other interesting comments?
Well, I saw that someone mentioned what's it called Stars Without Number, because I know that the Scene No Mean, games are really easy to use, and that's where I rip out and I liberally steal the DM turn system, where they've got all of this like build up where you can, as a DM, you've then got all your different factions, you can run around and then
The
make
faction
the world.
return and all that. Yeah,
Exactly, and I like that, and I also like the Cinemino, Stars Without Number, Worlds Without Number, Godbound.
there's also
All of-
Cities Without Number now, which is their cyberpunk version.
Exactly, and like these are systems that are really easy. They are able for most people to pick up, and they're very easy to come in. They're very focused in what they want to do. They break the setting down to what the creator thinks is the core essentials, and then the rest is for the fan base and for the game masters to effectively create thereafter. And I like that. It leads to a lot of creativity. It leads to a lot of freedom for the players, and I have seen a lot of positive come out of that. So I do agree that that's a good system. I would like to pick up Godbound. Actually, I have at least one player who keeps on asking me when I'm picking it up again. But again, it is one of those games where you need a group of people who are willing to buy into a very specific setting and a specific game style. And then you also need to have a chat about, what is the end purpose of this entire game.
Yeah, I would say the nice thing about any of the Without Number books too is that their resources that they have in there are easily liftable to any other game. I mean, honestly, they're just good to have in your library as DM tools. I'm gonna say I disagree. I don't think Traveller does it better. I think Traveller just does it different, because the problem is that Traveller is very gritty and specific, and Star Wars is not. And so they are not, one's not better or worse. And I know he's probably just doing a bit of shit talking there, but I would say that they're going to do different games. Yes, the types of things you can do in both of them are the same, but how it's done is really important. There isn't anything like a Jedi in Traveller, for example. They have psionic rules, yes, but it's not the same. And also, Traveller, like I said, it's just a grittier, more detail oriented game that Star Wars isn't. Let's see. Burning Wheel is a game that nobody actually plays. I'm sure people do, but it is. Burning Wheel seems to me like it's like a gaming manifesto. It's a bunch of really good ideas for gaming and a great bunch of thought exercises for gaming. But when you take it into consideration its whole self, I don't feel it's overly playable. It's also very gamey. It ends up being very gamey, and that's the thing. Like, if you want a game system that's very mechanically gamey, then Burning Wheel might be for you.
I've never picked it up. I've never read it.
I haven't.
I'm looking at the Burning Wheel website. I'm just seeing like, oh, they've also got Dungeon World. Okay, I know that Dungeon World was too bare bones for me when it came out. It was too simplistic. I like that to be a little bit more meat with the rules.
Dungeon World has one of the things that I really cannot get into. It's stylistically, it's just a big thing. I don't like player-facing RPGs. It's not for me. As a forever DM, the idea of running a player-facing game it just makes my teeth hurt, because it seems to me like a lot of sitting there doing nothing as a DM.
Yeah, so I agree. Like my experiences, and this is my experiences only, has very much been you're forcing the choices and the world part onto the players. And I, as a DM, I have not really found that to be a good way, because the players are often just scattergun, and you as a storyteller, you've got to then connect it all in, and it's just incoherent at most times.
Yeah.
I've seen some good usage of the stuff that games like Dungeon World brings out, where a DM would sit down and go like, okay, well, we're now going to build a world where the players make the world, and then they have to be in there. That resulted in the players making a magical post-apocalyptic world where it was just horrific.
Yeah,
and
this
we
is
had
a
to
good
go.
point. Real quick, Burning Wheel is not Dungeon World. Just so you know, you've not read it, so yeah, they're different. They're maybe by the same people, but Burning Wheel is French cuisine, whereas Dungeon World is like a Big Mac.
Yep.
So,
I'm just focusing on the one thing I actually do
Yeah.
know. I know nothing of Burning Wheel. I know a little bit about the Dungeon World, so I'm just
people are commenting, so I was bringing it up there. But
fair enough. It's cool. Yeah.
It's a fun one. So I actually have a stack here still.
Okay, go on.
This one, as you can see, this game book is almost brand new. Why is it almost brand new? Because I have nobody to play it with, and so I haven't even actually got around to actually digesting it and reading it. This is Wuxia. This is the game of like fantastic martial arts. And it is written by a guy who went to China to translate wuxia novels and is like eats, breathes, lives Chinese culture and history and wuxia fiction. And he has written this game that's really cool. What's up?
Is there like a yin yang mechanic in that?
I don't believe not in this one. The character sheet is pretty straightforward. You have. Wait, if it's all actually coming to focus.
Yeah, no, I can make that up.
It's you have dice pools in the system.
Yeah.
But you also kind of build your own style of martial arts, which is cool because you have signature abilities, you have counters, weapons, eccentricities. There are something like 200 and some odd martial arts abilities in this book. It's funny because they're like, there's no magic in this world, but they also have like pluck the string of your instrument and cut somebody's skin.
That's nice. No, the reason why I was
kung
asking
fu martial art movie kind of thing,
Yeah, the reason why I was asking was a play of mine once ran a one shot of Legends of the Wu Lin, which is more inspired by Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon sort of
that's
style.
what this is. That's the sort of fiction that inspired this. That's wuxia. And so what's cool is there is no directly fantastic element to that game. However, if you wanted to turn into that, let's say you wanted to play a more Chinese ghost story, Chinese, Detective D kind of thing, where you're dealing with more mystic stuff, I guarantee you, with 200 and some odd fantastical martial arts abilities, you could easily create monsters and magical items. Well, the game actually has magical items, so to speak. It has, weapons that are the ultimate weapon in the universe, kind of a thing, right? So you could easily do that, because all you would have to do is go through, okay, let's say I'm going to make, whatever Buddhist demon I'm going to make. Okay, I'm going to give him these stats, and I'm going to give him these martial arts abilities that are just part of him. You could then make a monster or a ghost or whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't have hopping kung fu bunnies. If you're talking about Usagi Yojimbo, no. It does not also have hopping vampires. So neither of those in it. But I don't see why you couldn't do the hopping vampires, because you have, again, 200 and some odd different martial arts abilities which can be very magical. And all you'd have to do is reskin them, because if you've ever done homebrew before, a lot of your homebrewing is just reskinning ability. So, like I mentioned, that you pluck a string and cut somebody type of a martial arts technique. Well, that could also easily just be rewritten as like a sonic attack. If you have some sort of shrieking ghost, or something, that you could do that easily. So that's one that I really actually would love to play. It also seems like it's really good for one-offs, because if you've ever watched a lot of kung fu movies, or you are familiar with, they are all very self-contained in their stories. Very rarely do you have characters going from one to another, except for in some of these serials like Detective D and stuff like that. But you could still play those as disconnected one-shots. This is one thing that I think it's a myth that one-shots are necessarily isolated and never happen again. You can do a series of one-shots and have the same characters come back. I mean, I think it's just this is that game we're going to play, and we're not committing to some open-ended, long format campaign. Let's see. The cool thing about that Full Metal Dragon, Osprey also does not seem to be overly protective of its IP, because there are several instances where games published by Osprey have then had supplements published for that game by the original author, which is really cool of them. Joseph McCullough, the guy who did Oathmark, Frostgrave, Stargrave, Silver Bayonet, all these different games for Osprey. He also did Rangers of Shadow Deep, which was not written for them. He also has things he has published for for Frostgrave and stuff separate on the side. The guy who wrote Zona Alpha, which is really cool miniatures. A lot of these are miniatures games, but he wrote Zona Alpha, which is based on Stalker, the Russian science fiction post-apocalypse. Zona Alpha is sort of a weird anomaly thing. That guy wrote that book and that set of rules for Osprey, and then published 2 supplements for it afterwards that are not published by Osprey. So hopefully, even if Osprey won't pick it up and won't greenlight it, he'll be able to get it out as an independently produced supplement. Osprey seems to be a really cool place for publishers for authors to go to get their works out there. They seem to be willing to pick up things, even multiple things in the same genre. So that's a cool thing. But yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily think it's dead. Wandering Heroes. I'll have to check that out. I'm assuming that's another Osprey game. Let's see. Yeah, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms setting. I think that's kind of where it takes place, because the game is very much in a loosey-goosey China that exists. You're never really getting into much in the way of imperial politics or anything in the game, as far as the few adventures that have been published for it are concerned. Yes, it would be cool. So, another on my list. Actually, any more on your list, Saxious? You've been sitting there patiently dealing with me.
That's all right. I mean, I'm sure I can just start pulling out a bunch of PDFs that I have, but I've mentioned the major ones where I've had an active interest in these things. But aside from that, no. I've said the majority of my piece.
All right, cool. Well, next would be this one. Cyberpunk 2020. This is still, in my opinion, the best Cyberpunk that has come out.
It invented the entire genre.
It didn't invent the genre. It
Oh,
didn't
really?
invent the term. It kicked off the RPG genre,
Okay.
but the term cyberpunk had been coined well before this came out.
All right.
But where cyberpunk really shines, and I mentioned this in a previous video, where you have specific universe rules, specific games, and then very broad stroke games. I feel like cyberpunk is to the cyberpunk genre what D&D is to the fantasy genre. It incorporates ideas and concepts from dozens, if not hundreds, of different sources and brings them together in a very open, amalgamated kind of a setting where you can kind of do the flavor of cyberpunk that you want.
Yeah.
Unlike, say, like Blade Runner, which is what I contrasted it against originally, where the Blade Runner RPG, the entire gigantic, fully produced Free League, Modifius, whichever Swedish company it is that's producing. I can't remember. The two kind of get crossed over.
Yeah.
That entire first book only lets you play Blade Runners. That's all. Literally. Not regular cops, not street cyberpunks. I mean, granted, Blade Runner is not necessarily a cyberpunk world, even though it is. I've had this argument. People are like, it's not cyberpunk. It's science fiction and film noir. What the fuck do you think cyberpunk is? But anyway, they did come up with a supplement. But this game will let you play that. It will let you play AD Police if you want, like, giant power suits, stompy robots fighting cyborgs. You can play everything in this game, and there's been so much produced for it, and it's still available, because this is my print-on-demand copy that I picked up. All of the original books are available for 2020. Cyberpunk Red is not a bad system. It just does some things that I don't like. It genericized a lot of the equipment and systems, which, having gone through the evolution of this game and then having the next version of it pull back so far, and yes, they just came out with their equipment supplement, but it's still not the same. It's also
just to build on what you're saying, I mean, Cyberpunk is regularly on Humble Bundle, and I've seen it, several months, with small intervals in between. Like you can get these PDFs so regularly. It's on sale so often.
I have all the PDFs, so I also like physical books now and again,
No.
And they are also available, and they're not overly expensive.
No.
This one, the price, because I actually bought this off a shelf. My friend at the who owned a shop back in Washington was stocking these on his shelves, and when I was doing my my paid DM gig, a lot of the money I made went to going and buying these. But there is so much in here that you can do, and actually, it's really, I think that it would be super easy. In fact, I've been talking with, I think it's actually with Karalik, on my Discord a lot about integrating concepts from Cyberpunk Red, kind of retrofitting them into Cyberpunk 2020. The net running rules in Cyberpunk 2020, a lot of people had problems with them. It never really troubled our group, but our group was really super chill. And so, like, if the net runner was doing his thing, then, the guys who weren't net running would be making a sandwich or something. Because if you wanted to run the Cyberpunk Red net running, which is very much more in the moment and designed to play alongside, it's just a very mechanical, granular system that you can modify heavily. I was in the conversation with Karalik on the Discord. Pretty sure it was him. Let me check the Discord, because I'd hate to attribute the wrong person. And diddly doodly it was, and yes, I went full Flanders there. No, I talked a lot about how in the early days of the game, before the 4 Chromebooks and the massive number supplements came out, we had already started to play with ideas that made sense, and it was super easy to do. And that's the one thing I really like about the granularity in 2020 as opposed to Cyberpunk Red, where everything's just a heavy assault rifle or a medium assault rifle. And yes, for a quick starting, fast playing game, that's cool. But I've always felt that in science fiction games, especially, nitty gritty, individually described and detailed equipment is important because you don't have a lot of other stuff going on. It's the fiddly bits in the gear that makes those settings fun. Because face it, you're not going to have a bunch of class abilities usually, especially in a game like Cyberpunk, other than your skills. Or, even in Star Wars, you have skills, and then you have force powers, and you have whatever blaster that does an extra 1 point of damage or whatever. That's important, I think, to a lot of people, especially to me, because I feel like when you genericize those weapons, then it becomes really flat.
No, I agree. I mean, I know, like in Mike Pondsmith and Aris Talsorian, they also made the Witcher role-playing game, and there they've got all these different classes, but they all use the same skills. So there are specific things that make sure that every single class stands out in their own way, and it's neat. It's also needed because then it means that if you're playing a Witcher, you've got certain things that you stand out of. If you play a fighter or a soldier, you are going to be better at certain things, and you're going to have your focus on other parts. And if you play a merchant, you've got a massive wagon that you're going to be hauling around with all the goods to sell. And there are neat ways to make you all sort of like independent, and for you also to contribute to a good group dynamic.
Yeah. This is the Chromebooks. I didn't grab them because I was only trying to grab the role-playing games. So the Chromebooks were 4 thin books, thin but dense. They were thin but dense. This is one thing I really like too about the old Cyberpunk 2020 production. It was dense, but not Palladium wall of text dense, because it's usually interspersed with a lot of graphics and like sidebars and stuff like that. So it was really Cyberpunk Red has gone too far trying to make a pretty book. It has a lot of wasted space. It's formatted weirdly because the rules were originally written to be optimized on a tablet.
Yeah.
And then as a book. So there's a lot of stuff like they'll have repeats of the same table 3 or 4 times in a Red book because they were thinking hyperlinky things. With 2020, the Chromebooks were neat. You'd pick up a Chromebook, you've got page upon page, like usually 3-4 items per page with an illustration most of the time. Not all of it, not everything. If it's a little piece of chipware, it's probably not going to have an illustration because do you really need an illustration of a microchip? But guns, secondary systems, and the cool thing is a lot of it wasn't even necessarily like things that would immediately have a use in combat, and not everything in it was like optimized either. They would produce things that are second best. And that's what's I think really important to the cyberpunk genre as well, is if you read the books, any of the fiction that cyberpunk is based on, and when I say the books, not like there's official books, even though I think they eventually published some, but if you read any of the source fiction, there's often cases where people are using jerry-rigged equipment or secondary subpar markets. Like the one thing that gets thrown around a lot is like, oh, you've got some of that old Soviet cyber gear. And so you would have the mechanics in the game for Soviet cyber gear. And he might, he's got an old, is he running with an Ono Sendai cyber deck, or is he running with some sort of, Weevil Runner bargain basement, cyber deck? And that was the cool thing. The options were there. Your character could run with subpar, and then they would over the course of the Chromebooks, they would come out with these like weird peripheral systems. Like, okay, here's you have your cyber deck. You can now plug this thing into your cyber deck to get extra abilities, and that eventually led us to doing things like, instead of doing like we did semi-portable cyber decks, they weren't like the small little handheld tricorder-y kind of cyber decks that you think of. or the ones that you can wear on your arm, which is what a lot of them are. The base cyber decks are, or even a cyber deck that can be implanted in your head, because cyber deck, the core cyber decks are relatively compact. We did semi portables where they would be like the size of like a keytar, or like a portable, you'd be carrying around like with a guitar style shoulder strap operating them. And I think we originally got the idea from that by looking at some of the pictures in the original Shadowrun book, because Shadowrun's decks were always a lot of times depicted as being large, having to wear a shoulder strap. But we extrapolated, okay, if you were to take a basic cyber deck and plug in all these peripherals and then have it marketed as the such and such semi-portable, then that gave our characters something, a way to pack around more ability, but it had its drawbacks. It was just a very, I'm kind of overstating the point, but the granularity of that original system lends well to a world that is usually a universe, a setting type that is usually really predicated upon customizing your gear. That fashion over function, the style is it's not what you do, it's how you look doing it, is so much a part of that setting, that micromanagement, that not even micromanagement, but the micro options of your equipment really made it sing, and Red kind of loses that. So yeah, anyways, let's see what we got. I can't say. I've never played Witcher. I know it's the first game that was. I know it was Mike Pondsmith's son's first game that he wrote.
I've played it.
I don't know necessarily about crunchy.
The combat is crunchy, but it's meant to be crunchy because you are playing in a world where combat is extraordinarily deadly. One of the players I have, when we went through it, basically described it as every fight you go into, you fight it as though your life genuinely depends on it. Because if you come out of that fight crippled, you are going to be suffering for the rest of the game. Which is very
Cyberpunk does that too. I'm not sure if Full Metal Dragon has ever looked at Cyberpunk 2020. Red doesn't do. Red really pulled back. But Cyberpunk 2020 was very gritty and granular too. It was also a kind of game where one bullet could kill your character.
There are similar things in The Witcher, but when you also then look at things like equipment can have wear and tear. You will have to, if you don't have a craftsman in your team, you're going to have to go to a craftsman who will charge you an arm and a leg to repair all of your things. Every damage you take reduces your armor defenses. Every time you do a parry, it reduces the durability of your weapon. If you're playing a Witcher, you've got to go hunting for all of the equipment and all of the stuff that you need to generate it. Like there is. So you were mentioning earlier today that you really like the game, the focus on encumbrance, resource management, and so on. It's there. It is there. There's a full-on focus on it, and as a game master, as a storyteller, you really have to sit down and make sure you understand those mechanics, because if you have anyone that's going to be playing a Witcher, that is going to be front and center, and it will be a huge thing for them.
Yeah, I'm considering Witcher came out well before Red did, and it was written by Pondsmith's son. I'm wondering if he was very much. I'm not sure how much it draws from the original Interlock system, which was the core system that Artel Saurian built around. Because this is the other thing that's fun, is these two games are written by the same company.
Yeah. And
so they both use the same core system, the Interlock system. So you can, before Cyberpunk actually came out with rules for power armor and battle suits, we built them with this. Older versions of this, because this is, I think, the 4th edition of the game. But you could translate it over pretty easily. Let's see.
I think Full Metal Dragon is just clarifying that he was looking at the crafting and alchemy system, which makes it very deep, which is I agree. I can't compare it too much to Cyberpunk 2020, but like I know that those two aspects of The Witcher
Yeah,
makes it a very system heavy game. But I think it adds to the game
yeah,
because you are meant to be in a world where most bandits don't have money.
yeah.
And yeah,
I think Cyberpunk 2020. I'm not arguing it. Cyberpunk 2020 actually has a lot of depth to it as well in the
hmm,
because there's a lot of customizing of equipment. There are full rules for developing new software for your netrunners. There are full rules for developing drugs
yeah.
uh, and stuff like that. So it has a lot of that. Um, I don't know how you could get any more gritty, granular in combat than 2020 because 2020 really is
Yeah.
combat focused. Um,
I,
I
I'm gonna have to
don't have any
bounce now.
direct experience with The Witcher though, right?
I'm gonna have to bounce now. I've got to go
Okay.
make dinner, and in about 40 minutes' time, I've got the D&D game.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Later, man. All right, and then there was me. So yeah, Full Metal Dragon. I don't have any experience with Witcher. I'm gonna say that it's probably Meteor because of it has a full crafting and alchemy system to it. Cyberpunk has elements of that, but of course, The Witcher benefits from everything that came through our Chelsarian before then. So I mean, it's likely a product of that lineage. Um, there's also really not necessarily a call for it in Cyberpunk. So, I mean, other than building cyberware, building software, building combat drugs, things like that, which are in those rules over the course of different supplements. So, yeah, I mean, Cyberpunk is deep as well. I mean, I would say that the two probably exist without having directly read Witcher. I would say there's likely as much depth in Cyberpunk as is in Witcher just because of the sheer volume of material. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. No, I'm not. I am not arguing your love of the game, and I'm not even arguing that it's necessarily not a deep game. I would defend Cyberpunk in saying that it is also deep. There's a lot going on there. Over the various source books and stuff that have come out for it, there's a ton going on in there, which I believe it would be hard not to have a ton going on because there is a lot. Witcher is more focused, and Cyberpunk is much broader. And it's, I mean, because Cyberpunk has rules for going into orbit if you want to. Anyways, the last game that I pulled on my list for today, if I can actually get it in my hands because it's a big boy, is this one. I like this game. I've read the game. I've seen it played. I've not played it myself, but I like the game. I don't like the book. I feel in their attempt to be stylistic, they wasted a lot of space. They're pretty books, but they are also book probably could have been half the size if it didn't have all that gloss. I'm a huge fan of the Alien universe. Um, I have run an Alien campaign before there was an Alien RPG. Well, more specifically, before this game existed. Back when the leading edge game existed and it sucked, so I made another one. Um, I know that the universe can support stories and scenarios that involve things other than the xenomorphs or any of the xenomorph mythos, because nowadays the game includes everything that we've seen in the first three Alien movies, as well as Prometheus, as well as what's the other one? Covenant. It also includes stuff from some of the other books. William Gibson's screenplay for Alien 3 informed some of the setting. So I want to run it. I like the stress mechanic. I like how that leads them to panic. I think it's a very good way and an elegant way of doing a horror-based game where fear and stress is always a factor in those shows. I was watching a thing on Alien the other day, or aliens, I should say, the other day, and they pointed out that in that initial engagement with the aliens, uh, the Marines have with the aliens when they first go down into the hive, um, uh, the only casualties that are caused in that initial contact are with our from friendly fire. Anybody who's killed in that engagement is because of the things that go wrong around the Marines due to their panic and their stress. All of the ones that are taken by the aliens, excuse me, are taken alive. So the only casualties in there are actually caused by the Marines themselves. And Squirrel Hermit, I'm talking about Alien, the Alien RPG. I didn't realize you couldn't see. So the Alien RPG, the one made by Free League. It's got a lot of stuff out. It doesn't. Well, it's got a good amount of stuff out for it. It doesn't have a ton. It's got maybe like, I think, three officially published bits for it, but it's got a whole supplement for the Marines. I think it's got a corporate source book that's out. They haven't announced any new books for it. Unfortunately, it falls in that realm of officially licensed content. So, what gets produced and how quickly is often affected by the ebb and flow of the IP that's involved. So, because we have new content, official content coming out for the Aliens universe, we may be in a holding pattern to find out what like Alien Romulus is all about. That's one of the new products. It's a new features that's coming out. The fan community seems pretty active on it. I like that the game has built into it two styles of play. It has conventional, regular RPG style where you're thinking of ongoing characters with an ongoing campaign. And then it has cinematic play. And the cinematic play is not just an excuse to run one-shots. It is a variation on the system focused on making the running of one-shots a different experience. And in a universe like Alien, where your chances are slim. I was trying to remember the quote that Ash says in Alien that, but I could not remember it verbatim, so I wasn't gonna make a fool of myself. But your chances are not great in Alien, and so that cinematic play really lends well to it, and I can see having a lot of fun running just one-offs every so often. But there's room for a campaign. And I think that's also good. Thank you, Full Metal Dragon. I don't memorize this stuff very well. Is it expanding better worlds or is it building better worlds? I thought it was building better worlds. I would like. So the Science Incorporate books are not out yet. Okay, cool. So are those on? Do you know if those are on the list? Although I believe the Colonial Marines book has information on running corporate troops, so you could also run corporate like troubleshooting teams and stuff. I think it's excuse me. Yeah, Building Better Worlds was the one that stuck out to me because it's Weyland-Yutani's motto. But so with the Aliens universe, I think it's defined enough to give you a space to play in, but it's undefined enough to where you can add to it and make of it what you will. I know in the game that I ran back using the D6 system, we had integrated espers into the game, basically low-level psychic sensitives And I think we took a nod from some of the Dark Horse comics on that. There was, if you ever read Aliens Tribes, I that's it's such a cool story, and it doesn't get a lot of coverage. It's so weird. I see all these other coverages of various novelizations and stuff, but not many people talk about Alien Tribes. And Alien Tribes is interesting because it takes place in the Alien universe, um, as after the established or establishment of the alien problem in human space. And so the main team in there is actually, their job is to go around and wipe out alien hives. And they have some very specialized roles in there. And the story talk gets deep in sort of some of the psychology and the like of the characters. For example, if you're familiar with the Berserker units in Alien, those start in Tribes, where they have the Mox unit. Mox Shit Kicker is his nickname. And he's a big power suit with a psychopath inside that's designed to take on an alien queen. But also part of that prospect, they have the tunnel rat in there, whose job is to actually get captured by the aliens. So they actually recruit people. It's funny because in her background, they talk about how they recruit people from abused backgrounds who are like used to surviving in weird places. And like this character is like used to get locked in a closet and stuff. So she's, rather than having a phobia of confined spaces, she's just really comfortable in confined spaces. So she wears this armor that so her whole shtick is to go get captured by the aliens, which are then going to take her to the center of the hive to get implanted with the egg. But her armor has explosive bolts on it, and so it's designed to actually blow her armor off of her body and out of the cocoon, so she can then escape. But it also includes a it sets up a beacon that Mox, the battlesuit, then focuses on. This is not agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is a fear of open spaces. She doesn't have a fear of open spaces. She's just really comfortable in confined spaces. So she's got a weird, almost she's comfortable in confined spaces because she hid in closets or something like that. I can't remember what it was. It's been a while. But yeah, that universe also has that book also incorporates a little bit of cyberpunk into the Alien universe, where one of the characters is a cyber tech, and he actually lays out little remote cyber heads, basically little robot heads that he uses his eyes and ears. And then when things go really bad, they have an implosion bomb that they launch at the station. So the Aliens universe that's still focusing on aliens. When I ran it, the Marine characters that we were running Colonial Marine game, Marines dealt with an encounter with another alien life form, and that is supported in the lore. The Marines is, yeah, I think that would be a good name for it. Claustrophilia. But the universe, the official lore, even if you watch the movie Aliens, they talk about how they've encountered other life forms. They've run into them. The bug hunt is commonplace to them. So you can easily run any number of different life forms, and then the official content has things like the harvesters and stuff like that, which are other species that exist in the world. Another adventure that we ran is we had, basically they were sent to a planet to try and stop somebody who had stolen a piece of tech. And that was their job. They just happened to be the ship in the area, and so they got there. They ended up caught in the middle of a labor dispute, like an actual labor war on a colony world where the corporation and the workers were in open conflict. There was one where they went to the biolab and had to deal with killer plants that were being experimented with. So, I mean, you can work. There's a lot going on. You can have all sorts of stories. Outland, if you're familiar with Outland, as far as I'm concerned, that takes place in the Alien universe. It was designed to look like Alien. It came out shortly after and was intentionally parroting the style of Alien. I don't think it's any coincidence that the Marshals in Alien Isolation are called Marshals and wear uniforms that are evocative of the uniforms that Connery and the rest of the Marshals in Outland wear. I think the creator of Alien Isolation is of a similar mind that it takes place in the same world. The sense I always got is that they've not run into the aliens proper, but they've run into other alien bugs. I think the implication there, and I think this has been supported by interviews and the like, is that they've run into alien life forms, hostile life forms that cause problems on colonies, because wildlife is a thing. The aliens universe is not a dead universe. There are creatures and other alien life forms that are out there. So when they're talking bugs, they're often literally bugs, like small creepy crawlies, critters, that are running around, or some other life form. But they're kind of a waste of their time because it's just a matter of extermination. I think the reason that they disdain the bug hunts is because they are going out and just swatting flies, for lack of a better term, because they're usually running into things that can't fight back and don't have any tactics or ability to resist their heavy combat. Let's see. Yep, Soldier, Kurt Russell fits into Alien pretty damn easily. I've seen actually some cool write-ups, fan write-ups of the vehicles from Soldier, the vehicles and weapons in Soldier. Technically, Blade Runner is in the Alien universe because the Tyrell Corporation is in there. If you really want to get down to it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. So you could run a Cyberpunk game in the Alien universe if you wanted to, using the Alien system. Yeah, so they've never seen it. They've never seen. There's a scene where they're like, a xenomorph. What's that? I think they're more trying to play down to the fact that Gorman is using technical terminology where nobody would actually ever use it. Yeah, it's clear that they've run into other alien life forms. Dude, stop. We get it. I know you're just playing, but Traveler isn't all that. I'm sorry. If Traveler was all that, other games other games wouldn't exist in that setting. Love your Traveler. That's cool. I've never played Traveler. I've known about it since the 80s. Never played it. Let's see. Oh yeah. And that's the thing. They've run into generic aliens. There's even possibly an allusion to them even having run into intelligent or at least sentient aliens before. Yeah. So, first of all, I hate the fact that they gave the Predators a name, the Yautja. I know it's fine, but the only AVP property that really, to me, works is the original comic which they then novelized. That was actually really well done. The movies sucked. Let's see. Let's see. All right. Well, kind of winding down. And I have to go anyways. I want to say thank you to everybody who showed up again. Thank you for coming on and listening to me talk about the games I want to run. I didn't really get into the whys and the hows. And I did touch a bit on the potential issues with trying to run them and why I think it is that I haven't run them yet. But definitely want to get some of these games in. Schedule's kind of full as far as games go, so it's going to end up having to be where I can squeeze them in. Most likely it'll be during the week. I don't have a lot of weekend time to play, and so it'll likely be one-offs here and there where I can get them going. So keep an eye out on my Discord. I do post things there. Like if I actually have a section for hosted games, if I have a game that I'm looking for players for, I will post it there. That's how I found the players for By the Sword, which is tomorrow night. So come back and watch me continue the sword and sorcery adventures with the great cast of characters I have there. Let's see. Other than that, I mean, there are more games on my shelf that I have. These are the ones, this is the short list of the games that really inspire me and make me want to run them. I have a lot of the other games that are interesting, but I'm not necessarily running out to get them. And a lot of them are also variations on the themes. Like I have like 5 different rule sets for Pulp Adventure. I have, in addition to Alien, I have a couple of other science survival horror games. I have Mothership, and I have a couple other ones. I have a couple other cyberpunk games, style games, which I picked up to mine for ideas. Yeah, so I mean, these are just the ones that really sing to me that I want to run, and eventually I will get to doing them. If By the Sword peters out, hopefully it goes on for a good long time because the players are still first level. But as other opportunities come up, I'll probably have a chance to run some of these, and hopefully I'll see some of you there, depending on if schedules mix. Anyways, I've got to get out of here. Like always, thanks for coming by, and get out and game.